My wife called my love pathetic after 9 years of me showing up for her every week. I said, fair point, and disappeared from her world without leaving the marriage. No coffee, no comfort, no presents. Then I handed her page 3 of the $4,000 manual she trusted more than me. My name is Owen Calloway. I own a restaurant called Faro in Portland. 38 seats, open kitchen, the kind of room where you can hear the knives when the dining room goes quiet. It took 7 years to stop losing money on it. The 8th year we broke even. The 9th year we turned a real profit, and I stood in the walk-in cooler for about 5 minutes just breathing, because I didn't know what else to do with the feeling. My wife is Nadia, senior accountant at a logistics firm downtown. Precise the way I'm precise, she understands systems, things that have to balance. When we met, she was warmer than she let most people see. She'd show up at the restaurant on slow Tuesdays and sit at the end of the bar just to keep me company while I prepped. We didn't need to fill the silence. That's how I knew it was real. Every Tuesday night, I cooked for her. Not as a gesture, not to earn anything. It was just how I showed up. Once I cooked through a broken finger because the lamb was already marinating and stopping didn't seem justified. Nadia told that story at dinner parties for years. She used to think it was the most Owen thing she'd ever heard. Later, Diane would teach her to call it something else entirely. That's where this turns. 8 months before that 11 o'clock call, Nadia's colleague Jenny invited her to a free workshop. The host was a woman named Diane. She used the title Life Alignment Coach, which is a credential you print yourself and no one can dispute. The workshop was built around one specific idea, that in many long-term relationships, one partner's emotional habits quietly consume the other's sense of self, and most people don't even realize it's happening until someone names it for them. It was a good pitch. I'll give Diane that. 6 weeks after the workshop, Nadia paid $1,200 for Diane's foundation package. 4 weeks after that, she upgraded to the Reclamation Circle, the group cohort, the full program at an additional $2,800. Over 7 months, the total came to $4,000. Some of it went on Nadia's personal card. The rest came out of a joint savings account we kept for Eli's school expenses. I didn't know about the joint account draws yet. I found out later, and when I did, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget the number. What I knew at the time was quieter than that. Nadia had started flinching when I put my hand on her shoulder. Not every time. Just enough that I noticed, and noticed that I was noticing. I didn't know yet what she'd been taught to call it. It was a Sunday morning in October, 7:43 a.m. I know the exact time because the espresso machine had just finished its cycle, that specific 2-note sound it makes when the pressure releases, and I was carrying 2 cups down the hall the way I had done a few hundred times before. I set hers on the nightstand. She didn't look up. That wasn't new. I didn't read anything into it. I was about to turn back toward the kitchen when she spoke. I need you to understand something. Her voice was level, measured, the tone she used in meetings. This kind of behavior, the coffee, the touching, all of it reads as emotional dependency. It's a little pathetic, honestly. I stood there for 1 full second. Then I picked the mug back up, walked to the kitchen, and washed it. Set it upside down on the drying rack. Stood at the sink for a moment looking at nothing in particular. I had a 6-hour braise ahead of me that day. I focused on that. Some words don't need a response right away. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is make sure you're steady before you decide what they mean. The next 3 days were quiet. I went to work. I came home. I was present with Eli. I didn't bring up Sunday, and neither did she, and I think she interpreted that as the matter being settled. Then she came to me with notes. She sat at the kitchen table with a single printed page, some sections highlighted in yellow, and walked me through what her coach had identified. My affection wasn't affection, it was emotional extraction. The touching, the cooking, the daily presence, these were, per the framework, strategies to ensure her emotional compliance. The document had a name for it, coercive warmth. She used the phrase boundary violation twice. Both times she held eye contact, the way you do when you've rehearsed something and you want to make sure it lands. I waited until she finished. Then I asked one question. Did Diane meet me before writing that assessment? Nadia said that wasn't the point. I read the highlighted page once. I handed it back. That evening I made Eli's dinner, kissed him goodnight, and went to bed without another word to her. I had made my decision, I just hadn't told anyone yet, including her. I didn't make an announcement. No conversation, no ultimatum, no moment where I sat her down and laid out what I was doing. I just stopped. No good morning touch. No Tuesday dinner, No reaching across the couch in the evenings, no coffee down the hall. I was still present. I showed up for Eli. I ran the restaurant. I paid the bills on time. I wasn't cold. I wasn't hostile. I didn't slam doors or manufacture silence to make a point. I simply withdrew everything she had decided to call pathetic. If 9 years of showing up read as emotional dependency to her, then she didn't need it. So I stopped offering it. The first Tuesday after that Sunday, Eli came into the kitchen around 6 and looked at the stove. Nothing on it. "You're not cooking tonight?" "Working late," I said. Which was true, I was always working late. But Tuesday nights had looked different for as long as he could remember, and we both knew it. He went back to his room. I grabbed my jacket and left. I didn't look down the hall on my way out. For the first 2 weeks, Nadia seemed lighter. That was the part I hadn't anticipated. She came home relaxed. She attended 2 more reclamation circle sessions and returned from each one with that particular settled energy she'd developed, the kind that comes from being consistently told you're right. One evening she stopped me in the kitchen and said, "I want you to know I appreciate that you're finally respecting my space." I said, "Sure." She nodded like that closed something and went upstairs. I think she read my silence as compliance. Diane's framework didn't seem to have a category for a man who simply took his wife at her word and stopped. No resistance meant no conflict. No conflict meant, in her model, progress. She had found a way to experience my absence as a win, and for those 2 weeks, she let herself enjoy it. Meanwhile, Eli started bringing his plate to the kitchen counter. It happened the second week, without discussion or announcement. Nadia ate in the dining room. Eli sat on a bar stool next to me while I went through vendor paperwork. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. He started calling them counter dinners, and I never explained why they'd started, and he never asked. The house got quieter. The restaurant got louder in the good way. Faro was having its best quarter in 7 years. Marco, my sous chef, had been refining a braised short rib dish we'd added to the menu 6 weeks prior. Tables were finishing it and flagging down servers to ask about it. A woman on a Tuesday night told me it was the best thing she'd eaten in Portland that year. I came out, thanked her, went back to the line. 2 nights later, Marco pulled me aside after the last cover. He told me a food journalist from Portland Monthly had been in for a private table on Wednesday, no press name on the reservation, but Marco had recognized her from a review she'd written 3 years back at his previous place. I noted it, filed it, went home and did not mention it to Nadia. I wasn't keeping score. I just didn't have anything left to share with her. Week 4. Nadia reached for my hand at breakfast. It was unconscious, I could tell by the way she pulled back half a second after making contact, like she'd caught herself. I didn't pull away. I didn't close my fingers either. I just let her hand rest on mine and kept reading the prep schedule I'd printed the night before. She sat with that for a moment, then asked if I wanted to do something that weekend. A trip maybe. She'd been looking at a place on the coast. I told her I had the Portland Harvest Food Festival. Vendors set up Friday, full booth Saturday and Sunday. She asked if that was new. I turned my phone toward her and showed her the schedule app. The festival block had been there since August 4 months prior, filed the same week I paid the $600 non-refundable deposit. It wasn't new. She just hadn't been looking at my calendar in a while. She went quiet. Then she asked, carefully, "Are we okay?" I said, "I'm fine," which was true. I went back to the prep schedule. That same week I had dinner with Dom. Dom has been my closest friend since culinary school, the kind of person who says exactly what he thinks and has been right often enough that you've stopped wishing he'd soften it. We were halfway through a bottle of Syrah when he set his glass down and asked me directly, "Are you leaving her?" I said no. "Are you trying to save it?" I thought about that for a moment. "I'm trying to find out if there's anything left worth saving." He nodded. Then he told me about a conversation he'd had with Jenny, Nadia's colleague, the one who'd brought her to Diane's workshop. Jenny had left the reclamation circle around month 11 and had been dealing with the fallout ever since. She'd told Dom something he'd been sitting on for a week before deciding I needed to hear it. Diane's program had a standard arc. Foundation, then the circle, then an advanced phase running from month 8 to 12. At the end of that arc, Diane consistently steered clients toward what she called full autonomy reclamation, which, in practice, meant a referral to a specific divorce attorney named Patricia Lear. And according to Jenny, that referral came with a 15% fee, paid to Diane by Lear's firm for every client sent over. I set my glass down. "She's not a life coach," Dom said. "She's the top of a funnel. and Nadia's been in it for 7 months. I did the math. 7 months in. Advanced phase at month 8. Nadia was approximately 30 days from the part of the program where Diane would hand her a divorce attorney's card and call it empowerment. I drove home without turning the radio on. Around 10:30, I heard footsteps on the stairs. I was at the kitchen table with the festival vendor packet in front of me when Eli appeared in the doorway, school clothes, hair still flat from the pillow, tablet in his hand. He said he came down for water. He poured a glass, then sat across from me instead of going back up. After a moment, he said, without any lead-up, "Is Mom going to move out?" I asked him why he thought that. He turned the tablet toward me. He'd run a Google search on a phrase he'd overheard Nadia saying on the phone, doing the work to reclaim herself. The first 3 results were all separation frameworks, autonomy language, the vocabulary of someone preparing to leave. He'd found it himself, at 10 years old, on a school night. "That's divorce language," he said. I told him I loved him. I told him that whatever happened between his mother and me, counter dinners weren't going anywhere. He nodded slow, once, the way he does when he's made up his mind about something. Then he took his water and went back upstairs. And I wasn't sure that was enough. It was a Wednesday evening when I sat down to pay the household bills online. Utilities, insurance, the usual stack. I was moving through the accounts on autopilot when a recurring line item stopped me. Reclamation Partners LLC. $350. Every month for the past 7 months. I clicked into the transaction history. The charges were coming out of our joint savings account, the one we'd set aside 2 years ago and earmarked specifically for Eli's school expenses. Not Nadia's personal card. The joint account. 7 months of draws she had never mentioned, never discussed, never asked about. I did the arithmetic. $2,450 gone from that account. The remaining $1,500 had gone on her personal card earlier, the foundation package, the initial buy-in. Total spend, $4,000. Drawn partly from money we had both agreed was for our son. I didn't call her in from the other room. I didn't say anything at all. I opened my own email, forwarded the full transaction history to myself, and wrote one line in the subject field, "Keep this." Then I sat back and looked at the screen for a while. I had told myself I wasn't keeping score. That was still mostly true. But there's a difference between not keeping score and not knowing what the game actually is. Now I knew. And I wrote down the numbers so I wouldn't let myself soften it later. The next morning I called Jenny. She picked up on the second ring. She was cautious at first, careful with her words the way people are when they've recently learned that words cost money. But once I told her I wasn't calling to assign blame, that I just needed to understand what Nadia had been inside, she talked. She had left the reclamation circle at month 11. Not because she'd had a clean awakening, it was messier than that, a slow accumulation of small moments where the framework stopped making sense. But she'd kept her documents, session summaries, welcome emails, and one invoice from Diane's LLC that itemized the curriculum in detail. She read me one line item over the phone. Advanced vocabulary module. Identifying coercive affection patterns. I asked her what that module taught. Jenny said it taught clients to identify and name the ways a partner's affection could function as a control mechanism. The touching, the cooking, the daily presence. All of it reframed as strategies, ways of making a partner emotionally dependent on your approval. The module gave clients specific language to use when confronting those patterns. Language designed to create distance quickly. She basically teaches you to pathologize love, Jenny said. I asked about the word pathetic specifically. Jenny went quiet for a moment. Then she said it was in the intake module. Page 3. Listed as an example of language a client could use to establish immediate emotional distance from a partner exhibiting dependency behaviors. It wasn't Nadia's word. It had never been Nadia's word. It was a word she'd been handed, highlighted, and coached to deploy. On a Sunday morning at 7:43 a.m., my wife had looked at 9 years of showing up and called it pathetic because a woman she'd paid $4,000 had told her that was the move. I thanked Jenny. I asked her to hold on to her documents. She said she would. 3 days later, the Portland Monthly Review hit my restaurant email. 4 paragraphs. The reviewer had come in on a Wednesday, eaten alone, taken notes, and written something I had to read twice to make sure I was reading correctly. She called the braised short rib a dish that takes 6 hours to prepare and repays every minute. She named me directly, said, "I brought a rare patience and precision to a city that often mistakes speed for talent. 6 hours to braise. Repays every minute." I printed one copy. I put it in the folder with the festival vendor packet face up on top. Then I went back to the prep list and kept moving. I thought about texting Nadia, sending her the link, saying, "Look." I had the phone in my hand for about 4 seconds. Then I remembered the word she'd used and I put the phone back down. She would see it when she was ready to see it. Or she wouldn't. That evening, Nadia came to me and said she wanted to talk about us. I told her I was listening. She started the way she always did now, measured, deliberate, building towards something. "I need to know if you're committed to growth," she said. "Because Diane thinks." I stopped her there. "Nadia." I kept my voice level. "I'm not going to have a conversation using a vocabulary that was sold to you at $350 a month." She looked at me like I'd said something in a language she didn't have yet. I said, "When you want to talk in your own words, I'm here." Then I turned back to the kitchen. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. I heard something shift in her breathing, not quite a sigh, more like a word she'd decided not to say. Then she went upstairs. She didn't come back down that night. I stood at the kitchen counter for a while after that. The folder with the festival packet was on the table. The review was on top of it, face up. The bank statement was in my email. Jenny's account was in my head. I had everything I needed. What I didn't know yet was what I was going to do with it. I talked to Dom again that week. He came by the restaurant after closing, sat on the prep counter while I broke down the line, and listened while I worked through it out loud. I told him I wasn't planning a confrontation. I wasn't going to sit Nadia down with a printed timeline and walk her through what Diane had done. You can't argue someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. What I could do was create a situation where she had to see it herself, not through my words, but through her own eyes. The Portland Harvest Food Festival was 2 weeks out. Nadia had come to every major event I'd ever done. Every opening, every press night, every anniversary service. She showed up because it mattered to me, and for a long time that had been reason enough. I didn't know if that version of her was still in there. But the festival was happening regardless. Marco had the booth dialed in. The short rib sliders were ready. The Portland Monthly Review was in the folder, face up. If she came, I'd know she was still trying. If she came with Diane's language in her mouth, I'd know something else. Either way, I'd have my answer. I told Dom, "I'm not going to fight for her, but I'll leave the door open one more time." He handed me a side towel and we finished breaking down the line without another word about it. What I hadn't fully accounted for was Eli. The school counselor called on a Thursday at 2 in the afternoon. I was in the car outside the restaurant, engine running, about to head in for prep. She said she wanted to flag something before it became bigger. Eli had asked his classroom teacher that week whether parents who stopped eating dinner together always got divorced. The teacher had noted it, standard protocol. I sat in that parking lot for 22 minutes after I hung up. I had been so careful. Careful not to speak badly about Nadia in front of him. Careful not to fall apart where he could see it. I had kept the counter dinners consistent and the routines intact and told myself that was enough. I hadn't stopped to think about what he was absorbing anyway, the parts I couldn't control. The things a 10-year-old pieces together in the quiet without asking anyone. I had been so focused on not crumbling in front of him. I hadn't thought about what he was seeing regardless. Then I went inside and started prep. It was all I knew how to do. 2 nights before the festival, I ran the overnight braise at the restaurant. 6 hours, starting at 9. Short ribs for the booth, enough to yield around 200 sliders if the batch held. Marco stayed until midnight. Around 2 in the morning, with the timer reading 40 minutes, my phone buzzed on the steel counter. "Nadia." A text, "I'm coming tomorrow. I want to see you work." I read it once. Set the phone face down. The braise still had 40 minutes and it didn't care about anything else. Whatever was going to happen at that festival had already been set in motion. The review in the folder, the evidence in my email, the door I'd left open. I had 40 minutes left on the braise and a whole day ahead of me. I picked up the spoon and kept going. The Portland Harvest Food Festival opened at 10. By 11:30, the Faro booth had a line 12 people deep and Marco was running sliders like clockwork, tongs, plate, napkin, next. The tent smelled like the braise we'd spent 6 hours building the night before. And every time someone lifted the paper sleeve and took a bite, I watched their expression do the thing that means the food worked. 3 chefs I knew stopped by in the first 2 hours. All 3 mentioned the Portland Monthly Review. One of them, a guy who'd been cooking in this city for 20 years and didn't hand out compliments, shook my hand and said, "That piece was the real thing, Owen. Don't let it go to your head, but don't ignore it either." I thanked him and went back to the front of the booth. A woman in a green coat came through the line around noon, held up her copy of the magazine, and asked if I'd sign it. I signed it right below the headline. She took a photo. I handed the next slider to the next guest and kept moving. All of this was happening before Nadia arrived. I saw her before she saw me. She came through the festival entrance alone, moving through the crowd the way she does in unfamiliar spaces, measured, taking stock before committing. She was wearing the gray jacket she'd had for years, the one she wore to things that mattered to her. I noticed that. She scanned the tent until she found the Pharaoh sign, started walking toward it, and then stopped. She'd found the foam board at the front of the booth. The Portland Monthly Review, printed full size, mounted at eye level. I watched her read it from across the tent the way you read something that surprises you, starting over at the top when you reach the end, making sure you got it right. The line moved past her. People stepped around her. She didn't seem to notice any of it. When she finally looked up, I was already handing a slider to the next guest in line. We made eye contact across the booth. I nodded once. That was all. She looked like someone trying to remember something. She'd worked hard to convince herself wasn't real. Eli appeared 20 minutes later. He'd come with his friend's family. I'd arranged it 3 weeks prior, asked his friend's dad to bring him by around noon. Nadia hadn't known. Eli came through the entrance in his blue jacket, found the Pharaoh sign, and made a straight line for the booth. He saw his mother at the side. He saw me at the front. He stood still for a moment with both of us in his field of vision, processing faster than he let on. Then he walked around the counter, found the spare apron on the back hook, and tied it on without asking anyone. He picked up a stack of napkins and started passing them to guests. No announcement, no permission, no hesitation. He just showed up and worked. And something about watching him do that, this 10-year-old who'd been quietly carrying more than I'd realized, just tying on an apron and getting to it, was harder to hold than anything else that day. Nadia watched him. I watched her watching him. Marco glanced over once and went back to the sliders. When the lunch rush dropped around 1:30, Nadia came to the side of the booth and said she needed a minute. I told Marco I'd be right back and walked with her to the rear of the tent where it was quieter. She started the way she always started now. Measured, building towards something. I've been doing work on my boundaries, and I need to know if you're... Nadia. My voice stayed low and even. I need you to hear something before we go any further. She stopped. Diane charged $2,450 from Eli's school account. Not your personal card, the joint account we set aside for him. She has a referral arrangement with a divorce attorney named Patricia Lear. Every client she sends over earns her a 15% fee. I let that sit for a second. And the word you used on me, pathetic, it's on page 3 of her intake module, listed as language a client can use to establish immediate emotional distance. She handed you that word. It was never yours. Nadia didn't move. I'm not asking you to believe me right now, I said. I sent you an email this morning. Bank statement, Jenny's account, the module excerpt. I'm asking you to read it before you go back to that program. She reached for her phone. The email was there, sent at 6 a.m., before she'd woken up. She'd seen the notification. She just hadn't opened it yet. She opened it now. I watched her go through it. Bank statement first. Then Jenny's written account. Then the module page, the one with the word sitting in the middle of a paragraph like it had always been there, waiting to be used on someone. She read that page twice. The festival kept moving around us. Voices, footsteps, the smell of food from the neighboring tents. None of it seemed to reach her. Then she looked up. I called you pathetic, she said, because a woman I paid $4,000 told me it would help me reclaim myself. Her voice was flat in the way that has nothing to do with performance, the flatness that comes when something lands all at once and there's no framework left to process it. I'm sorry, Owen. I said. I know. I didn't reach for her. I didn't tell her it was okay. I let her words stand exactly where she'd placed them, because they needed to stay there for a while before either of us could figure out what came next. She canceled the remaining reclamation circle sessions the following Monday. No call to Diane. No explanation. She stopped the payments, filed a dispute with her bank on the recurring charges, and sent one written request to Reclamation Partners LLC for an itemized receipt of all services rendered. She never heard back. The couple's therapist Diane had recommended part of the same referral network she didn't use. I'd already found someone else. A woman in Northeast Portland that Dom's wife had seen years back. Nadia agreed to the first appointment without argument. We went on a Wednesday evening and sat in 2 chairs across from someone who asked direct questions and didn't have a module to sell us. It was uncomfortable the way honest things are uncomfortable. We went back the following week. The $2,450 showed up in Eli's school account on a Thursday. One transfer. Nadia didn't bring it up, and neither did I. I saw it in the banking app while I was checking the restaurant accounts, set my phone down, and made Eli's dinner. It was a Tuesday. He ate 2 plates. Somewhere in the middle of it, Nadia came into the kitchen, pulled a stool up to the counter on his other side, and sat down. No announcement. She just sat. Eli kept talking about something that had happened at school, a project, a kid who'd said something funny, and we both listened, and the 3 of us finished dinner together at the counter without making it into anything more than what it was. That's how it started again. Not with a conversation or a signed agreement. With a stool pulled up to a counter on a Tuesday. I'm not going to tell you we're fine. Fine isn't honest. There are things she said that I haven't fully set down yet, and there are conversations we haven't finished. What I can tell you is that when she talks now, it sounds like her. Not a module. Not a framework she paid $4,000 to absorb. Her. She called my love pathetic once. One word. On a Sunday morning, handed to her by a woman who charged $4,000 to teach people how to leave. I stopped. Not to punish her, to find out if she'd noticed what she'd been told wasn't worth having. She noticed. Whether that's enough to rebuild on, I honestly don't know yet. But I'm not begging for my own life back. That part is done. If any of this sounds familiar, the reframing, the vocabulary that arrived one day and changed everything, the feeling of being told that showing up is a form of control, then you already know what I'm talking about. Drop a comment. Tell me what you would have done. And if this one hits somewhere real, you know what to do. I'm Owen. I'll be in the kitchen.